This week's episode is about Agnes True, or Agnes Finney as she was born. She was born October 30th, 1861, to Michael and Kate Finney. So she was the middle child, James being her eldest brother and Charles being her youngest. Agnes went to school as a child at the Mount St. Scholastica convent. She was taught by the nuns. She was also one of the prettiest girls in Atchison, very popular. She enjoyed her church activities at St. Benedict's Church, and she loved dancing. In fact, she had a reputation as one of the best dancers in Atchison. Now, for some unknown reason, Agnes didn't marry until she was 54. She met her husband William True, he courted her, and then they married in 1915. William had been married before and had 3 adult children at the time. When he and Agnes married, they lived in Rouleau, as William was known at that time as Billy True. To those that knew him and worked with him, he was a superintendent and engineer for the Burlington Railway. Unfortunately, 5 years into the marriage, William and Agnes went on a holiday to Wyoming. While there, William suffered a major stroke. He was paralysed. Agnes made the decision to bring him home to Atchison, to her mother's home, the Sallie house, where she knew he would receive the best of care. 18 months later, after returning to Atchison, his health declined, and it seems from all reports he went into a coma. So at 7 a.m. on the 4th of May, 1918, William passed away at the age of 56. He was laid out in the home and later buried at the Mount Calvary Cemetery. Agnes never remarried. She remained a permanent fixture in the local church, Benedict's, where she was highly thought of. She was a member of St. Anne's Altar Society and a charter member of the Atchison Music Club. She absolutely loved music. Agnes had no children to William. She left behind her baby brother Charles, her nephew Charles, and was laid to rest at the Calvary Cemetery. After she passed away, the house, the Sallie house, was primarily a rental home. Now, I want to discuss 2 stories that are linked to the Sallie house, and hopefully clear up any confusion between the truth and the imagination of others. So the first story I'll talk about is that of Joanna Barnes. Apparently the story goes that she is connected to the hauntings of the Sallie house. Well, let's see. In 1898, Joanna Barnes was married to a man called Frank Barnes. However, they divorced, leaving her to care for their small children, and she was also pregnant at the time. Joanna came to the house that James built. She acquired the deed from a lady called Catherine Bays. Shortly after Joanna moved into the home, she became mentally unstable, and she was taken away to the asylum, where she stayed until she was released back to home and deemed by the asylum to be well. Shortly after her release, she gave birth to her youngest son, Frank Barnes. She borrowed some more money down the track for some improvements to the home, but later, in 1906, she deeded the home back to the Finney family, in fact to Agnes. Shortly after she moved to her new home, she deserted the children. Her sister was called, and her sister ended up finding Frank, the father, and then later they found Joanna in Colorado. On Joanna's return to the house in Kansas, she remarried Frank, but unfortunately a few months later she became mentally unstable again. One night she decided to sleep downstairs with little Frank. He was apparently by all accounts her favourite child, but she decided to go downstairs and sleep in the front room with little Frank. Unfortunately, she also decided that that night would be the night she would end it all. She turned the gas on to the room that she was in, shut the windows and doors, and the next morning her daughter came down the stairs. And when at the bottom of the stairs, her daughter looked across to note that the door to the room was shut, and upon entering the room, she found her mother and Frank asleep. Little Frank, unfortunately, was deceased. Joanna was taken to the hospital for treatment, where it was expected that she wouldn't survive, but she did. And after she got better, she was taken to an asylum. That was the end of the story. Little Frank was buried at Cummings District Cemetery, and Joanna, I'm not quite sure of her fate in the end. What I do know is that the story that she would haunt, or little Frank would haunt, the Sallie house makes absolutely no sense. Other than the fact that Joanna owned the home next door to the Sallie house for a short time, there is no logical reason to see or understand why they would try to link her to a haunting in the home that she never lived in. And just to clarify what I have established regarding people who lived in the Finney home, while the Finneys owned the home, according to the census data, they always had a lodger. So even when Agnes lived there, she had lodgers. Their names in the records aren't very clear. However, they were there. They were there in the census, and I could see that there were other people living in the property at the time. Even when Kate and Michael owned the home, they had a lodger. In December of 1948, Dick Mize and his family moved into the house, and they had a little daughter named Sarah, whom they often called Sallie. She was still alive, so Sallie never died in the house. They actually moved out of the house a few years later, but Sallie was still alive at the time when the alleged demon called Sallie made her first appearance in the home. In 1958, Ethel Anderson moves into the house. Now, she was an ex-wife of a doctor, and she had lived in the home until she got into ill health, at which point in 1990, so she was there for a long time, she went into a facility. I read that there were people trying to link her to being a satanic worshipper, etc., which I find highly insulting, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. In 1990, after she went into a nursing home, Bobby and Colleen Humbard moved into the home, and their little girl, or their daughter, had an imaginary friend that she called Sallie. And that little girl at some point later stated that the picture that we now see of Sallie looked like her imaginary friend. In 1994, we have the notorious Debbie and Tony Pickman move into the home, and they are famously known for being the people that say there was a demonic presence in the home that scratched them, levitated things, threw things, all sorts. So they have written books, or Deborah has written books, and she makes a living from their story about the Sallie house. In 1999, Mary Liggett lived in the home. Now, Mary lived there for 2 years approximately, and she states that nothing out of the ordinary happened while she lived there. In 2002, David Leeper lived in the home, so he moved in. How long he was there for, I do not know, but one would assume that it was until the new owners purchased the home. I haven't bothered to research that because my main concern was on the history of the home before Deborah and Tony Pickman made their claims. Now, I want to get back to the lady Ethel Anderson. I find the fact that people have tried to link her to the home in regard to being a satanic worshipper really, really disrespectful. Ethel Anderson was 94 when she passed away. Now, she didn't die in the house, she died in a nursing home. But for 52 years of this lady's life, she was in the nursing profession. She was a sister, a mother, a grandmother, and she went to St. Benedict's Catholic Church. I cannot imagine why anyone would say that she was a satanic worshipper. The next person that they've tried to link, or I don't know who they are, but obviously people with little respect for the truth, Sallie Isabel Hall. She died at her home, which was located at 821 North 1st Street. However, I did research that house. I was hoping to see if it was still there, etc., but it doesn't look like it is. It looks like possibly that particular part of town has been demolished and there's new houses there. The Atchison Daily Champion, the newspaper, on Friday the 3rd of March 1905, ran a story. Sallie Hall, coloured, wife of Will Hall, who works at the Walters Brickyard, died this morning, and the funeral will occur Sunday at 2 p.m. from the 6th Street Baptist Church. Mrs. Hall was only 34 years of age, but had given birth to 14 children within the past 16 years. All had died at birth but 3 girls and a boy, who survived their mother. The oldest is 16 and the youngest is 2. A baby was born a week ago. Think of the suffering, think of the tragedy crowded into that brief life. Every year there has been a birth and a death at that house, and this year there have been 4 deaths: an uncle at Christmas, a sister of Will Hall a few weeks ago, a baby a week ago, and now the mother. The family lives in the alley east of 2nd Street and adjoining Mound. From the Atchison Globe, 23rd of February 1905. So as you can see, the house has many stories to tell, but do I believe that Sallie Hall haunts the Sallie house? Absolutely not. So that is the end of my Sallie episodes. I hope you've enjoyed them. Any questions, feel free to put them in the comments section and I shall answer them. Goodbye.